Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are having an awesome day, and I am so excited to be sitting here and chatting with one of my fellow YouTube content creators. And today I have Amruta Ranade.
Ranade, it's
Amruta
okay.
Ranade. I'm so sorry. We literally just practiced this like 5 seconds ago. Um, I am so excited to talk to you about technical writing, about developer advocacy, and I know that you have had a job switch recently, and I would love to hear like about that process as well. But before I get a little bit too into it, I would love for you to go ahead and share with my viewers a little bit about who you are and maybe your background if you'd like.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. I am Amruta. I am currently the staff technical writer at Bytes. I was previously at Cockroach Labs. I have had like a few titles at Cockroach Labs. I started as a senior tech writer, got promoted to staff, moved over to developer relations, and then recently switched jobs, going back to tech writing. So my career has been like started off as an engineer, tech writing, developer advocacy, back to tech writing.
That's awesome. I love that. I would love to know a little bit how you got into tech writing from engineering. I think that's like such an interesting journey, and especially like adding developer advocacy, which is something that is sort of a new career path. I wouldn't say that it was something that was super popular like maybe 10 or 5 years ago, but it's something that has definitely popped up and bloomed. So I would love to hear how you sort of made that transition through roles.
Sure. So once upon a time, a long, long time ago, I used to be an electronics engineer. That's like my primary degree. And on graduation, I landed a job as a VLSI engineer. Like my job was to design and test the electronic circuits that a company made. And being the new kid on the job, they also like asked me to work on the data sheets
Mhm.
for the electronic chips. And I had done like a summer course in tech writing because I feel like this is back in 2009. So at that time, technical writing, at least in the Indian tech industry, was as new as, or it felt as new as developer advocacy feels now.
Mhm.
So it was like, oh, this is like a new thing. Let me see, like a summer course can't hurt. So I just took like, just a course. And I realized, so I kind of had that idea of what that is. So when I got put on the project, like, okay, you also can work on the data sheets. I was like, wait, I like this part more than the actual, like the designing and testing trips part. So that after that, I left that job and I moved to Symantec as that was my first official job as a tech writer was at Symantec. Um, Stayed at Symantec for a few years when that was user-facing documentation. It was still like within the high-tech industry, but it was still more user-facing than internal. And then I moved to a startup called Druva as the engineering technical writer. So I moved from like user-facing to more engineering developer documentation.
Mhm.
And by that time, I had been like completed 5 years as a tech writer, and there was no um, I couldn't figure out where to go next from there. I felt like I had done everything I possibly could on my own, like gotten as far as I could being a self-taught technical writer. And India doesn't have any technical writing graduation programs, at least that I know of, or at least
Mhm.
at that time. So I started getting like I was like, okay, I should probably get like some education in this field that I guess is my career now. So I started looking for graduation, like graduate programs, and I came across the one at Missouri S&T, which was like more practical based than theory based because the other graduation programs I was looking at were more theory based about like the why of technical writing. And the idea is that after that program, you become like a professor and you go into the academic side of tech writing. But I
Mhm.
wanted to stay in the industry, so I wanted like a more practical program. So I chose the program at Missouri S&T, came here to the States in 2015, did my master's, graduated in 2017, and then landed my job at Cockroach. And I've been there for like 4.5 years before I quit like last month. Um, that was the tech writing part. So by the time I moved to developer advocacy, I was like coming up on a decade in tech writing, and I was kind of getting, bored because
Mhm.
it's like, again, I'd done everything I could possibly think of in like a career ladder in tech writing. and developer advocacy was starting, to gain traction.
Yeah.
And I have a YouTube channel where I talk about tech writing. So I was like, wait, I could do this like as a full-time job and get paid for it. So that sounded like the logical move of I already write the documentation for developers. I can broaden that and make more content, including docs, but also videos and live streams and Twitter memes for developers. That sounded like very interesting. I convinced the company to let me try it, and they like had me officially interview for the position, but then I got it. So I transitioned from tech writing to developer advocacy at Cockroach Labs. And then 1 year into the role, I realized that it's very overwhelming. Like I kind of converted my hobby into a job, and that never ends well.
Yeah.
So like, you know what? I think I need that distinction of like, this is my job. I write documentation and then I create content on the side as a hobby. So yeah, it was a fun year, but it was also very overwhelming and I burnt out really, really bad.
Yeah.
Uh, and then it was also like 4.5 years is a very long time to stay at a place. So I was kind of getting antsy anyways. And then Airbyte came along. So yeah.
I love that. And I'm going to leave all of the links to your channels and your social media below so that anybody can go ahead and check out your channel, which totally should. A lot of great resources over there. Something that you mentioned in one of your more recent videos is that developer advocacy as a career path needs a little bit
Mhm.
more structure. And that is something that I 100% agree with. I think because it's so new right now, every sort of company has their own way of what they're expecting. And I feel like a lot of the marketing expectations also fall onto a developer advocate, which completely can be like way overwhelming, especially if, for instance, you're the only developer advocate, or if you are the inaugural developer advocate and you're just sort of taking on everything and trying to figure out how to turn like everybody's ideas into like something that could be used. So
Mhm.
I completely agree there that it could be overwhelming and definitely could burn you out. I would love to hear about, so I know that you've done tech writing and you are currently a tech writer. What are some of the skills that you had to learn in order to be a tech writer? And do you consider this more of a coding role or not coding, or a little bit like use coding sometimes, but maybe not a lot?
Um, I don't use a lot of coding. So tech writing is like a very broad term, and each like there are niches within tech writing.
Mhm.
The niche I specialize in is developer docs for the data space. That's how I define it. So there's not a lot of coding involved in my niche, but there are other niches like API documentation, for example, that do require coding, but that's not my specialty. So I think the answer is the most annoying answer ever. It depends
Yeah,
on what niche
of
you
course.
want to specialize in. But I don't have to do I don't have to do much coding in my role.
Mhm.
Um, the skills I had to learn is okay. The skills that work for me, given my background as an engineer, is the analytical skills or like
Mhm.
just the curiosity of wanting to figure out how things work. And then that came naturally to me because I had kind of developed that as an engineer. The skills I had to learn were the how do I then communicate the thing that I just learned to somebody else.
Mhm.
So that's the communication part, the audience analysis part, I don't know, even just like pure writing skills, because the way you write for a technical audience is different from like a creative writing field. So
Mhm.
making that transition and learning the best practices for tech writing, that was definitely something that I had to learn. Um, yeah, but I would say those are also like collaboration skills because I don't make the things that I write about. So being able to collaborate with the engineers and again best practices of how do you respect their time because you're like they have other important things to do, so making sure that I do my homework, making sure I user test the product myself, like treating myself as the first user of the product and then going to them with like questions of okay, I tried this is where I'm getting stuck at, what did I do wrong, or did like just giving them something to work off of instead of going like okay, now tell me everything you built. So things like that are things that I think you pick up through experience, but
Mhm.
that's definitely I had to like learn consciously.
For sure. I think that's something that I often forget as a developer is just because I envision something one way or that I write something one way, that does not mean it is going to translate to everybody the exact same way. So I might
Mhm.
develop something and have what I consider a clear vision of what it is and what it's supposed to do and how it's supposed to help. But once somebody else starts using it and I realize, oh, maybe my vision wasn't so clear, it definitely
Mhm.
makes me like go back and think or like add even extra documentation, because I think documentation is something that everybody can contribute to. I like that you said in one of your videos also, sorry, I've been binging them.
Oh, that makes me
um,
happy.
it's that documentation should be treated like it is the product. And having come from an environment where we basically had no documentation at all, and it wasn't even treated like an afterthought. It was more of a, why do we need this? Like, just put
Mhm.
comments in the code. And documentation is like so much more than just comments in your code. So coming from a tech writer slash developer advocate, what are some ways that us as developers can help out with documentation? Is there anything that we can do specifically, or is there anything that we should document, or like a certain way that we should think about things and how to document? Because in honesty, documentation really just helps everyone, and it should be everybody's job to
Mhm.
contribute to it. So I would love to hear from you.
Sure. Yeah, that's an excellent question. Um, I think, hmm, okay, I can think like a few different answers. The first is things like putting comments in the PRs, right? Because I like one of the tasks for the documentation team is writing the release notes.
Mhm.
So it makes our life so much easier if like the PR comments or like the PR titles are clear enough that we can make sense of them, and I don't have to go through like the entire thread and you know, go through the code and figure out what exactly that change was and if that change is relevant to the user. Like you, because you made that change, it would be so much easier for you to just be like, okay, even like a basic thing of this is not exactly user or does not have an user impact, you can leave this out, or
Mhm.
this has an user impact and this is the user impact. Even if it's not well formatted or like the perfect grammatical structure, that's okay, but just like giving me better raw material as a tech writer would definitely be helpful. So yeah, just like thinking from a user's perspective and being thinking about, okay, this is the change I made in the code, but what does the user uh, care about and about this change? Just flipping that switch in the brain would, I think, would be super helpful. The other thing is, there are two ways you can work with a tech writer. The first is you can like give them a demo and have them like take notes as you know in their own format
Mhm.
while you're talking things through with them. The second way is to just brain dump everything. Like just give me everything you're thinking of and I can take it from there. So
Mhm.
those are two the primary ways that I work with engineers is either you do the first, I call it the throwaway draft, the draft that nobody is ever going to see,
Mhm.
but just brain dump everything and give it to me, and we can take it from there. Or walk me through the change, and then I can take notes in my format, and then that's my starting point for the process.
Okay, awesome. I am curious, do you find that there is a difference between composing documentation for users versus composing documentation for developers? Or do you sort of treat both approaches the same way? Because I might think that I might add like extra details maybe for somebody who isn't necessarily the most tech focused or who isn't on like our internal developer group, but I would,
Mhm.
you might not, I don't know. I haven't done a lot of technical writing or a lot of documentation crafting. So I would love to know if you have to use sort of like two halves of your brain to attack those two different audiences, because they can be quite different.
Um, I think the approach is the same, but the execution is different. What I mean is,
Mm-hmm.
in either case, I have to be the first to, again, user test the product, and because if I don't understand it, I can't communicate it well to others.
Right.
So that's always my starting point for any project is I need to understand what I'm talking, like what I'm writing about.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of time in the research and user testing part of the process. The second part is where things like start to diverge is the audience analysis part, because now I know this thing. Who am I talking to? Who's on the other end of this? If it's a user, then I think about, okay, why are they reading this? What information do they already have? What knowledge can I assume? And then what exactly do they need to take away from this document that I'm writing? And then I'll cater, like I'll distill the information that I've gathered into that, like for that persona, and make sure that serves their purpose. And for the developers, the same thing, but I think I can assume more knowledge, or I don't
Mhm.
need to go into as much detail about the technical jargon as I would
Right.
for a user. So I guess like the approach remains the same. It's just the level of, yeah, I guess it comes down to assuming knowledge being the driving factor in this of how much do they already know and why are they reading this document.
Okay. Awesome. That totally makes sense. And speaking about different audiences and not having to break down technical jargon or having to break down technical jargon a little bit more, I think something that is really popular, not just now, but has been for a little bit, but I think we're seeing it more now with Twitter and TikTok and people looking to make the transition into tech because of
Hmm.
a lot of the benefits that the tech industry can provide and a lot of the nice salaries that people can see. Just being honest, a lot of people just want
Hmm.
a really well-paying job, and a lot of times tech does that. But there's a lot of people out there who don't necessarily want to code. Do you think that technical writing is something that somebody who might have experience in writing or experience in a different industry, are there transferable skills that might make technical writing a little bit easier? Or do you find that maybe even a little technical background would help a little bit more with technical writing?
I think like 100% technical writing can be an excellent field for somebody who does not have a technical background, as long as they're curious about technology.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's the prime, like fundamental skill is that you don't need to be technical, but you need to be technologically literate. Like you need to be
Mm-hmm.
curious about why does this thing work this way, and then being able to convey it in, you know, a consumable manner. Two of the best tech writers I know come from a writing background and no technical background, and they're like fabulous at their jobs. So I've seen like success stories of people who come in from different fields and then have a very successful tech writing career. But both of them are also incredibly curious about technology. Like they're genuinely interested in the field. So I think you brought up a really good point of there's this perception of if you want to get into tech, you have to know coding. You don't
Mm-hmm.
need to know coding, but you need to know tech. I think they're two different things of like the execution and implementation part, which is coding, but then the final product is still pretty technical, but you don't need to know how that got made. I don't know if that makes
Exactly.
sense. Yeah.
No, that completely makes sense. I like to think about it a lot of times as sometimes people assume, since I'm a software engineer, that I can like troubleshoot printers or troubleshoot
Mhm.
computers in like some way or fashion. And I'm like, no, I just write the code and it shows up on the computer. I can't break down for you exactly how the computer works. And I think that
Yeah.
might sort of be like the same sort of concept where you don't have to know every single part of how the technology works, but knowing what the end product is and how different components might work together could definitely be helpful. And I love what you said about curiosity. I think curiosity is what drives you and what continues to push you in a career, because once you stop being curious, even if you're only doing a job, you know, for money or whether it's just like a paycheck to you, once you stop being curious about the work that you're doing, I think that's when things start getting bad and you start not wanting to work anymore, and where your environment just sort of goes downhill. So I love that. I always say you don't have to have like this burning passion of 1000 suns for tech, but it always helps if you are at least like a little bit curious or wondering how things work.
Yes.
Awesome. I would love to hear, what do you think some of the most challenging things about being a technical writer are?
Ooh, good question. Um, some of the tasks can get pretty tedious.
Mm-hmm.
Like the release notes that I mentioned, it's like week after week, you just go through all the PRs and the code, and then you try to make sense of what was the engineer trying to convey here. And that can get like pretty repetitive and tedious. So you kind of have to gamify it a bit. Like when I was at Cockroach and I used to work on the release notes, treated myself like a cafe working session. Like I have chai latte right now if I work on the release notes. So there are like ways to make it fun, but it can get really tedious.
Mhm.
The second challenge would be, again, it can also get overwhelming if the team doesn't understand how documentation works, or if they're not willing to make that effort to learn it, because the perception is like anybody can write, like it's just docs, it's just an afterthought, which is why I'm very
Mhm.
insistent on only want to work at companies who get documentation and
Yes.
understand that there's like a process and things that take time. Like it would take time for me to ramp up on a new product to be able to write about it. You can't just like drop documentation issues on me and be like, okay, now go write it.
Exactly.
So I think that's one of the challenges, is getting stakeholder buy-in,
Mhm.
and having a company that understands and is willing to let you, take the time to produce good documentation and not expect like magical results.
For sure. Yeah, I just started working at a company in August, and the documentation that we have is unbelievable in comparison to
Yes.
like things that I've seen before. And not only does it just make you feel better like coming in, there's documentation about everything. So a lot of times, sure, I might not know the exact page, but somebody can always point me in the right direction of like a specific document. And then from there, I can drill down and usually find whatever I need. Or if I find that I am not finding what I need, which is very rare, it's so easy for me to just either add it or reach out to the right person so that they can format it properly and use, like the same tone of voice and abide by all the guidelines that the company has in place, but reach out to somebody who is an expert in that to be able to add it,
Mhm.
because that helps everybody. Like I said, documentation is an everybody thing, and
Yep.
having an attitude of documentation being its own product that needs to have its own standards and guidelines is a good mindset to have.
Yeah, I love that. Yes.
Awesome. So I know we've been talking a little bit about tech writing, because that's what you have the most experience in. I would love to know, what were some differences between tech writing and developer advocacy that you found, or what were some of your favorite tasks or things that you just found were different? I know that you said it was a little bit overwhelming, and I completely get it. But for anybody who might not know what developer advocacy is, do you mind breaking it down for us?
Sure. So I think the biggest difference between tech writing and developer advocacy was the format. Like as a tech writer, I only write documentation. As a developer advocate, I did live streams and YouTube videos and Twitter memes and hackathons. Hackathons was a very big project for us.
Mhm.
So all of that. So the scope is just like anything you can think of in the creative content format is
Mhm.
can be clubbed under developer advocacy, which is also why it gets overwhelming. And I think the part that made it even more overwhelming was the metrics, right? Like
Mhm.
before becoming an official developer advocate, I used to make Twitter memes anyways, but
Mhm.
suddenly I had like an okra of make like 3 Twitter memes a month, and I'm like, that's taking the fun out of it. Like I can't promise I'll always think of like creative memes to make in a month. Um, so yeah, just like I don't know, maybe it was me, maybe it was a me problem that I couldn't figure out how to productionalize my creativity. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like I'm a pretty intuitive, creative person. I do things when I feel like doing them, like in a creative uh task anyways. And then being able to like have a system for my creativity kind of like made things a little janky. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, what was your question? I think I rambled a lot.
No, you're fine. So you did a lot of live streams, social media interactions on behalf of the company, not just like you from your personal
Yes.
account.
Yeah.
Did you find that creating that content was, I know that you mentioned you sort of have to do it all the time, or you have to be on all the time, which can
Mm-hmm.
be stressful, because I know that there are like maybe 2 weeks where I don't go without putting out a video because I haven't felt that I have the inspiration to put it out, and I never want to put out a video of me looking like dull and sad and boring,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
having to have a million cuts in it trying to figure out like what I want to do. Did you
Mm-hmm.
find that that was like really, really tricky to always have to be in that on state of, okay, I have to be present and active like on social media and things like that.
Yes, 100%. Yes, and another thing that we did was a lot of workshops and conference, there were like a lot of online conferences. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic played into it a bit as well, into the
Yeah.
burnout factor, because I was literally sitting here in this chair in front of the screen, looking at this camera in some format. It's either a live stream or a conference or a workshop. And it just felt like a never ending cycle
Mm-hmm.
of things. Like if it wasn't a pandemic, then I would have traveled to a conference, which would have broken up the routine, so it wouldn't have felt like as tedious and just
Right.
at a certain point boring to do that. So yeah, that definitely and being on all the time, like you said, oh my god, yes, that was a big factor of like I just want some downtime right now.
Yeah, I know that's something I kind of struggle with sometimes is feeling that on feeling. I don't feel that a lot of times. So I'm always scared because I think like with live streaming, like we were saying before, like I started recording, one of the reasons I haven't necessarily jumped into live streaming or content that's live yet is because I'm always afraid that whatever I am in that moment is not going to match up to what I am in my videos, because I have to like prepare myself and I know what I'm going to be like in my videos because I just have this, I don't want to say personality that I put on for videos, but it's different being in front of a camera versus like being live when things are happening like in real time. It's something that I would love to do, but there's
Yes.
sort of this pressure or this feeling. And then I can only imagine that like having the company's name riding on the content that you create can be a little bit scary as well.
Yes, oh god, yes. um Yeah, I did learn, okay, but that was like a good learning experience because you just mentioned something about not always being on, like the experience that you shared about
Mhm.
not always having that energy to do that. It did make me track my own energy and figure out what's the best time for me um, when I can be on. Because I found
Mhm.
that there's one week in the whole month where I'm like on all the time. So I
Mhm.
tried to like, like I did try to then schedule things in that week so that then I can have the rest of the month to just like edit stuff or like work on the back end side of things. So did turn out to be like a good experience that I'm now using in this new job where I only record my YouTube videos on my channel on the weekend in that weekend. That's it. If no other videos get done that month, that's okay. As long as I get like two videos done that weekend, we are good. So it did help with figuring out my own productivity systems.
Good. Yeah. I've been thinking about like developer advocacy, but the more I like hear about it, I think I would burn myself out of doing content that I personally like doing. So I think I'm going to keep it this way for right now.
Yeah.
Just engineering and then doing
Well,
content on the side.
yeah, that's actually a very healthy approach, in my opinion. But I'm also seeing a shift in the industry. Like the thing I
Mhm.
talked about in my video about the industry needs to evolve, and I think the
Yes.
industry is like, or like the developer advocacy field is aware enough to know that something needs to change. So I
Hmm.
am seeing a lot of like specialized roles within the developer relation teams, like community manager and social media manager, and just like YouTube content. So I feel like it's getting to a healthier place. Maybe just wait some more time until it's like more
Hmm.
solidified and then make the switch.
For sure. It's something that I think is really interesting, especially for people who love to teach and love to share what they've learned. And I think it's a very great experience to be personal, especially for a company that might want like a very warm and familiar face. If people have already seen you around YouTube and Twitter, of course, I feel like they would be more inclined to check out the technology that you are technically promoting because you're at the face of the company. And I think you just have such a warm presence, which
Aw.
You do. It's like easy to talk to you. You're very warm, and I could just like sit here and listen to you talk about whatever company, and I think it'd be super fun, and it would be very, very easy to learn from you because you just break things down so easily. And the thing I love about your videos is that they're not like super, super long, like tutorial style, but they are consumable enough to where I feel like if I want to sit down and learn something in like 15-20 minutes, I can easily do that. But I walk away knowing what I learned and not being like, I just sat and watched a video and it's not sinking in. So I love
Oh,
that.
thank you so much. You made my day.
Of course. I do have just like one more question, or technically two. If you were talking to somebody who wanted to make the switch, either like to break into tech or wants to try out technical writing, is there one piece of advice that you might give somebody?
Yes, write technical documents. That's like my biggest pet peeve, to be honest, about the tech writing. Like, okay, I'm gonna go on a mini rant right now. I'm so sorry
Mhm.
about this.
No, go ahead.
Uh, I get a lot of questions about people who want to get into tech writing because they think that it's like an easy thing to do, right? I can
Hmm.
write, I understand technology, I can be a tech writer,
Hmm.
but you don't become a tech writer when you get a job. You get become a tech writer when you write technical documents. It's
Hmm.
like you being a developer, right? You are a developer no matter if you have that official title. Like if you take a sabbatical and you decide not to work for a year and just like, roam the world, you're still going to be a developer because you're somebody
Exactly.
who writes code. I feel like tech writer is kind of that. Even if I wasn't doing this officially, in some capacity, I would still be invested in creating technical content or writing just because I like doing that.
Yeah.
So that's my profession. That's who I am. So I feel like that's like a missing part in the whole conversation of how do I become a tech writer is that you become a tech writer by writing technical documents. Like there is
Yeah.
no shortcut. There is no magic pill that will get you a job without actually having done the work. And there's so many ways that you can prove to a company that you can do the job. Just write a tutorial on how to play a Wordle. That's the prompt I gave for
Hmm.
my newsletter subscribers this month. If you know what, just write a tutorial on something that you use every day. Or there are programs like Season of Docs, which Google runs, where open source organizations put out calls for technical writers to help with their documentation. I think that's like a very good avenue for that. Or we have a Write for Airbyte program where you get paid to write like a tutorial or like whatever our list of things that we need to get written,
Hmm.
which can help you. You can also get paid for it, and you can use that as a sample in your writing portfolio. So there's many, many, many ways out there of building your portfolio, but you have to do it. You have to
Yeah.
sit down and write technical documents.
Yes. I love what you mentioned about writing a tutorial on just like how to play Wordle or how to write Wordle. It doesn't have to be something that is like for an actual company or something that is like real or that's going to be used in production, but sitting down to practice, just using something that you already know is better than not having anything in a portfolio, or rather than just saying, oh, I know how to do it, or you think you know how to do it. Do it
Yeah.
just like you said, with something simple, an example that you can do, something that's accessible to you. You don't have to spend a ton of money to go out and try to figure out how a piece of code works, or maybe even just like you said with the Google Season of Docs. That's a great way as well, doing things that are open source. I think open source is a really great way if you don't have any experience at all to get yourself into a door. It's almost like working without having worked yet.
Yeah. Yes.
So awesome. And then I know you just started at Airbyte recently, but if
Mhm.
you had to say, what do you think is next for you in your career, whether it's like growing at Airbyte or doing something in particular?
The next thing for me at Terabyte, and I would say beyond, is managing a team because
Mhm.
that's something that has been on my, career vision board for a while now. But I just, I don't know, I kept prioritizing other things.
Mhm.
But at Airbyte, I feel like that's the right place and time to finally work on that next step in my career, which is I want to be a documentation manager and learn to lead a team.
I love that. So, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, Amruta, for talking with me about technical writing, about developer advocacy. Where can people find you? Again, I'm going to go ahead and put these links in the description so you can check them out for yourself, like you should. But where can people find you around the web?
On my YouTube channel, it's just my name, Amruta Ranade, and also on Twitter and LinkedIn, also just my name.
Awesome, wonderful. I want to thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing so much enlightening information. And until next time, I can't wait to see you all in my next video.
Bye. Thank you so much.